It's been a while since I've done a scene breakdown, so I thought I would do one for my latest ArtStation post today. I recreated the DL-44 blaster from Star Wars. This is the gun that Han Solo uses. I created it in Blender and Substance Painter. Here you can see a 360 turntable animation, and as well as a sketch fab. And the link to this post will be down in the description, so you can check it out. If you want to look at the wireframe or anything like that. But besides that, we will be breaking down how I created this in Blender. So here's the gun. Here's the material preview right here. Let's let Blender load. And I think it actually came out pretty dang well from Substance Painter. I'm very happy with the final result. Probably the best gun model I have done. And some of the most in-depth texturing detail I've done, like these ridges and these spirals, that's all done in textures. Normally I don't go to that extent, but I'm happy I did this time. You can see there are some weird texturing errors. That's just due to how I had my UVs laid out, and can definitely be fixed pretty easily, but that's just how it kind of came out this time around. I don't think it was a big deal, so I ended up going with it. This is a 15K triangle model, so it could be used in a game. It's all triangulated. It's ready to go. It's a game asset. It's not the most optimized game asset in the world. I could probably get this to about 9,000 or 10,000 triangles, which would be better. But let me go ahead and show you the wireframe, and we can take a look at where I failed with this model. So here, with this piece, it's very dense compared to the rest, and that is because I applied the subdivision surface modifier that I had on it while modeling to get a clean bake for these sort of curved edges. And this is very similar to how you would do a revolver cylinder. Obviously, you wouldn't use this many if it's a 6-shooter. And I'm still learning good ways of approaching this with clean topology. Haven't quite figured it out, but this is that's how I've done it. So the reason I applied the sub-D modifier to it for the low poly was because if I had not, the low poly, it was much, there were only like, let me pull out the annotate tool. There was only maybe that many polygons to it. So in the bake, there would have been a lot of baking issues there because it didn't follow that real smooth curvature there. I actually don't know how to delete the annotate tool, so I'm going to undo that. I don't ever use the annotate tool. So yeah, if we look at it here. Oh, there we go. If we look at the high poly here, yeah, same thing. It's just got more detail to it. Yeah, so that's kind of what it looked like before it was applied. There would have been baking issues. Okay, let me pull back in the low poly. I have my high poly and low poly models separated like so here. They're in different locations. That's why, because I was rendering the high polys over there and the low polys over here, because I have a scene set up here hidden where I got the render. So let's go ahead and take a look at the rendered scene. I'm using the SSGI add-on for Eevee to screen surface global illumination, something like screen space global illumination, something like that. It's a great add-on. It makes Eevee look a little bit better, a little more realistic. So I was toying around with that. So that's how I animated. I just animated it rotating. Obviously, I have some lights set up here, some warmer colors over here, some cooler colors over here, and a simple concrete texture on this backdrop. This is something I pinned into my scenes when I want to render an object like this. So in another file, I have this set up, and then I just pinned it over. Let's go ahead and hide that. Come back to frame 0, wireframe. The grip, I'm pretty happy with. I don't think I could get it any more low poly. Perhaps I could, but it's only 1,000 triangles, and I feel happy with everything with the handle. I think the handle looks really good. These textures from Substance Painter were excellent. these screws, all the screws in this model are simply textures. They're not actually 3D objects. And I think from over here, they look great. Now, obviously, when you get up close to it, you can tell, okay, that's a 2D texture, not a 3D screw. But I'm going for low vertice count here. I want to keep things low so it can be used in a game, which I'm not going to be using it in a game, but that's what I'm kind of practicing towards, I suppose. This could definitely be lower. This is such a low detail part of the mesh, but I simply just took in a torus and could probably run a decimate modifier on that and decrease it. But again, not a big deal. Not a big deal at all. But yeah, this was a super fun project to work on. I used hard ops and box cutter, which I've been playing around with for several months, and I'm sort of getting the hang of them. There's still a lot to learn. There's not a lot of good resources out there for either one of those tools. Box cutter's pretty straightforward, but hard ops can get pretty in-depth, and they create a lot of n-gons. So in this case, I do have a lot of n-gons here before I triangulated this mesh, and that's fine. It really didn't affect any shading issues. As long as your shading is good, and you're not using a sub-D workflow, you don't need all quads. The reason for that, I should say, is if you're using a subdivision modifier workflow. If you have n-gons, let's try to make an n-gon here. So now we have an n-gon. If we added in the subdivision surface modifier, we're getting some really weird results. Versus if we do that beforehand, we have consistent results. So subdivision surface does not work well with n-gons. It works okay with some triangles, but it really demands a quad workflow. And for most of the model, I don't have, I'm not using subdivision surface modifiers. I obviously used it here. I believe I used it probably on that. I used it in all these cylinders to make them smoother. Since I've triangulated it, it's not going to work. Let's switch over to the high poly and we can take a look at it. So yeah, I'm using a bevel with a subdivision after that to give it a real smooth look. But as far as how I actually modeled this, I started off with the receiver. I just created a cube, and then with box cutter with box cutter I used the make tool, which is this one right here, and then the n-gon, and I just simply traced a reference image kind of like this, and then from there, scaled it out and started beveling certain edges like that to create the curved parts here, etc., etc. And then using other booleans to inset these pieces, manually beveling edges like these, which some people call them chamfers. I don't know why they do. I think that's something from like Maya, chamfering edges. I don't know. I prefer the term bevel. May or may not be correct, but that's the way I've always said it, and probably will continue to say it. So yeah, it was a really good time. One more interesting thing to note about this model before we call it quits here is, let's go back to the low poly because that's the one that's been UV'd. These are actually two different texture sets. If we come in to the UV editing, so yeah, the upper body, which the scope would be included in that upper body, is on one UV set, and the lower body is on another. And they're two different materials, lower body and upper body. Now, I'm honestly not sure what the ramifications are for doing this if it's a game asset. I'd like to think that you probably need to keep everything to one texture set, but I didn't want to spend a lot of time figuring that out. I grinded the crap out of this model pretty much straight, and by that point I was like, all right, it's going to be easier just to separate these out so I can have bigger areas for the top and the bottom and won't have to worry so much about packing everything in there neatly. So that's kind of my thinking when I did that. So let's come back into the UV editing, select everything, and that's the UV islands for the lower half, and then the upper half is here. So it was a fun model. I'm actually thinking about. Oh, before I move on to that, let's look at this. I used my graphics tablet to just draw in some scratches here, HS or DL-44. I mean, obviously not authentic to the film. In fact, this is really not authentic to the film at all. But I had fun doing it. It was kind of just inspired. Obviously, it's the same gun, but I took some liberties here and there. Yeah. Anyways, I'm thinking about making this a tutorial series, potentially a course on creating guns in Blender and Substance Painter, game-ready guns, because there is a big lack of that online. So either on Blender Market or Udemy, I'm not entirely sure what the legality is of using a Star Wars weapon in such a course where I am making money, but it may not be this exact gun. It may be something very similar. This gun is obviously heavily inspired by the Mauser. That's where the Star Wars designers got it from, the overall design. So we may just end up making a Mauser. But I really do like this gun. It's really cool. And I may even take it into Unreal or Unity and just get it shooting, because I think that'd be really cool, seeing it shoot lasers. But yeah, that's the scene breakdown for this DL-44. I hope y'all enjoyed. Before I leave you, I want to leave you with one thing. If you're looking to improve in Blender or Substance Painter, the number one thing you can do is simply make things. That may not come as a shock to some of you, but others, you need to realize that you're not going to learn anything from watching video after video after video. You need to apply yourself and start making things and not quit on those things when they get hard. That doesn't mean if you find yourself in a bad project, you shouldn't back off of it and go do something else. What it does mean is when things get hard, do not quit. Just because you don't know how to model a certain aspect of it, tell yourself, okay, I'm the 3D artist in charge here. I get to make artistic decisions when and where I choose. So, I mean, artistic decisions were made on this. For example, this area right here didn't follow my reference image completely. It was a little different in the other reference image, but this was something that I was comfortable with, and I gave myself a time frame. Time frames are another big thing you can do for yourself, because then you're forced to make those some decisions. They're not always good, but sometimes you're forced to make decisions when you have a time crunch, but time crunches aren't always good. So anyways, I'd like to thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one. Make sure to join the Discord down in the description below for more info. Thanks.